This isn't a lore breakdown. It's just me trying to explain why a game about ruins, loneliness, and bad choices somehow became a place I kept going back to when I needed space. Hello, survivors and dwellers, and for those of you returning, welcome back. I am the Wasteland historian. Normally in my broadcasts, I take you with me to uncover the buried stories of the Wastes. But today, I want to step out of character a bit and talk about what Fallout means to me as a player, not a historian. I figured I'd start with how I first got into the series, what it did for me as a person, why Fallout 3 is my favorite, and why I think Fallout as a series connects with so many people. So let's rewind the clock a bit to where it all started.
Vault Tech have prepared these
Back in 2010, 20-year-old me was playing games like Borderlands 1, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and Ratchet & Clank. I loved all of them, but they were sandbox-driven and mostly linear experiences. At that time, everything felt loud, fast, and competitive. FPS titles like Black Ops and Battlefield dominated the space. I didn't actually buy Fallout 3 myself, it was just around, and one day I figured I'd give it a shot. I didn't expect it to click with me the way it did, but I fell in love almost instantly. Looking back, it makes sense. It was the first game I'd ever played that made the world feel bigger than the story itself. Before I go any further, I want to say this video is just my experience with Fallout. I'm not trying to convince anyone that it's the greatest series ever. If other games meant more to you, that's totally okay. I just wanted to finally lay out the thoughts and feelings that pushed me to start this channel in the first place. I first picked up Fallout 3 at the perfect time in my life. I needed a world I could disappear into. Somewhere I could lose my sense of time and place and just be. I know people tend to roll their eyes when someone says a game changed their life, but for me, Fallout became a place I could go when I didn't really have anywhere else to put that energy. I'd played plenty of games that boasted immersion and atmosphere, but none of them gave me that same feeling of being small inside a massive, breathing world. Fallout just felt different. There was something about it that let me step outside myself, and sometimes that meant stepping away from feelings I didn't know how to carry yet. Other games had character creators, clothing options, voice choices, but what I'm talking about is deeper than that. I could play for hours and forget to eat, forget what time it was, forget everything else that was going on in my real life. To put it in a different perspective for you, the same thing happens when I'm painting. Nothing else in my life does that for me. Something about Fallout pulls me so far into its world that I forget to be a person entirely, and honestly, that escape gave me a kind of peace I didn't get anywhere else. It's hard to explain what Fallout means to me. From the outside looking in, it might look silly or like just a game. But for me, Fallout was my escape hatch. Whether I was hiding from everyday stress or something a lot heavier. There were nights where I would boot it up not because I wanted to play, but because I needed an emotional time out. The Wasteland gave me room to breathe. When I started writing the script, I wondered if anyone else ever felt this way about Fallout. I'm sure someone out there understands exactly what I'm saying, and if that's you, let me know in the comments. It'll make me feel a little less intense about admitting this stuff. I love Fallout for the quests I complete for the people who are already gone. I love it for the sad stories it tells, and for how those stories stay with me, for the way it helped me understand the loneliness of the Wasteland and what it means to find a faction or place to belong to. Fallout is violent, sometimes hilarious, and always fun as hell to play. But underneath all that, it's sorrowful, impactful, and it's something I carry with me even when I'm not playing. For some reason, I've always been drawn to stories that hurt, and no other game does that to me the way Fallout does. I don't love Fallout for the things that it gives me. I love it for the absences. I make Fallout content for people who sit with stories. I hope when you watch my videos, you're taken somewhere in the wastes and get a little lost in my storytelling. That's the only reason I started this channel in the first place. Fallout has always been a series about grief wearing a mask, about people walking through the ruins of choices that were made long before they were born. I'm drawn to it because I love finding the parts other people step over, the metaphorical graveyards, the empty rooms, the notes that don't resolve into heroism. One thing I think Fallout does better than any other series is that it never tells you how you're supposed to feel. The world doesn't pause to explain who's right or wrong, who deserves sympathy, or what the correct emotional reaction is. It just presents you with situations, sometimes cruel, sometimes absurd, sometimes deeply human, and lets you sit with them. You're trusted to decide what they mean to you. Fallout 3 was my first true RPG open world game, and the moment I stepped into it, I was hooked. The atmosphere instantly struck me. There was a huge empty map built specifically for discovery. The game mechanics and menus felt interesting and new. The music opened up a whole new world to me, and I still listen to those songs daily. Before anything else though, before the choices or quests or stories, the first thing that greets you is the atmosphere. I just recently started a new playthrough of 3 and realized something that I had forgotten after playing Fallout 4 and 76. The atmosphere of Fallout 3 was everything. Yes, my mind was blown from the beautiful intro and graphics of 4 and 76, if we forget how the first 2 years of the game went, scratched the itch for fresh Fallout content. But still, even after playing the newer games, something was still missing. And replaying 3 reminded me exactly what. There's something incredibly special about 3's atmosphere that was never really duplicated. Fallout 3's opening cutscene hooked me initially. It wasn't flashy or a huge set piece. It was a slow pullout of a single epically destroyed scene, set to a song I would come to love.
I don't want to set the world on fire.
The creeping words showing up on screen and the sound of distant gunfire. And then you hear the line that's basically sacred now, delivered by the legend himself, Ron Perlman.
War. War never changes.
For a moment, I forgot I was playing a game. That intro shows everything you need to know in just a few minutes. But if I'm being honest, stepping out of Vault 101 is still the single most unforgettable moment of my entire gaming life. I'd never had a game that made me feel that way. It was such a simple effect. The burning brightness of the sun slowly fading into a clear picture of a destroyed capital wasteland. It made me feel like my world had just expanded in all directions at once. My first thought was, is anyone left out there? Fallout 3 gave me a sense of loneliness and struggle that I don't think any other Fallout has captured since. That immediate feeling that the world is empty, dangerous, and barely holding on. Even the air feels toxic. The sky feels heavy. The colors are muted into that harsh brown gray that just sits in your lungs, and that green tint makes everything feel perfectly bleak. Everything about the atmosphere tells you survival is the baseline and nothing comes easy. Replaying it, I found myself thinking, was it always this empty? Was it always this hard to win a firefight? It was, and that's exactly why it worked. The atmosphere forces you to feel small. It forces you to feel alone. And the developers tied every part of the environment into that atmosphere. You'll find hubs like Megaton, where the entire town is made from scrap. Steel sheet shanties sprinkled across the wasteland where people are just trying to survive. And hidden homes amongst the rocky cliffs. You can honestly identify a building's pre-war purpose just by the architecture. Hotels and entertainment spots feel frozen in time, stylized and glamorous, now shattered and broken. Government buildings are heavy, brutal bunker-style structures, perfectly suited for the environment. There are huge bronze heads or rusted chrome hood ornament-style Valkyries mixed amongst crumbled buildings and busted monuments. They even added streamline and Art Deco touches that echo directly back to Fallout 1 and 2. One of the most haunting experiences for me was the first time I entered into the Super Duper Mart. It's quiet, dimly lit, with bodies hanging from hooks strung up from the ceiling. The environment was almost like a horror game. It's dusty and silent, and there's a strange fog in the air. Or the first time I entered into a metro tunnel. I could barely see, and the deeper in I went, the more I heard. It was completely terrifying. Hats off to Jonah Loeb, who was the artist behind the Feral Ghouls, and Mark Lampert, who voiced them. What a duo. Walking through any of the Fallout games, you see skeletons scattered everywhere. In buses, in buildings, in beds. They tell stories. They're frozen in time, some surrounded by the objects they had with them in their final moments. Suitcases are left on beds, clothes half-packed. Precious items untouched since the world ended. It makes the world feel full and completely empty at the same time. Environmental storytelling has to be my all-time favorite part of the Fallout series. You can walk into almost any area, any building, any room, and immediately feel like something happened there. Fallout 3 was my introduction to that kind of storytelling, and it showed me just how powerful it can be. While you're fighting for your life out in the wastes, you're also quietly uncovering the lives of the people who were there before you. I also find it fascinating that a big part of Fallout's aesthetic is modeled after what people thought the future would look like in the 1950s. The style is unmistakable. I've always loved old movies and old music, and even though you'll never catch me dressing that way, I love the aesthetic of the era. Walking through more developed areas of the Wasteland and seeing that style still clinging on, it pulled me in even further. That retro futuristic vibe is such a huge part of Fallout's identity, and drawing from that style, I have to talk about the Pip-Boy. Fallout doesn't give you much when it kicks you out into that big empty world, but it does give you one constant, a Pip-Boy. This CRT militarized wrist-mounted personal computer shouldn't fit in a post-apocalyptic world, but somehow it fits perfectly. It makes you feel like you never truly leave the environment. To me, it was a completely new way to experience a game menu. One that made the world feel more real instead of pulling me in and out every time I needed a stim pack or to check my next objective. I know the combat in Fallout 3 isn't the strongest by any means, especially by today's standards. And don't even get me started on the bugs. So many bugs. But when I first played it, I thought it was cool. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't buggy and horrible at times. None of the Fallout games were perfect, but I loved them nonetheless. VATS especially. It felt like part of the world instead of just a mechanic. I honestly don't remember the last time I used it as much as I did in Fallout 3 or New Vegas. It became less important in the newer games, which is honestly kind of a shame. The last atmosphere-related thing I really want to mention is the music. Oh my god, the music. Before Fallout, I never would have thought that era of music would appeal to me, but walking through the Wasteland to Roy Brown or Billie Holiday just fit, like a puzzle piece snapping into place. It feels completely wrong for what's happening around you, and somehow that's exactly why it feels right. You know the saying, opposites attract? I'm shooting raiders in the face, running for my life, or completely juiced up on Psycho, and all I hear is,
I'm tickled pink that things are rosy.
there isn't a single day where I don't listen to my Ink Spots record or throw on Fallout radio while I'm cooking. There's something oddly comforting about the music in Fallout for me. It's almost comically inverted compared to the reality of daily life in the Wasteland. And that contrast is a huge part of why the atmosphere sticks with me. But let's just say you aren't one for the big hits of the 50s, and Three Dog isn't your style. Keeping the radio off is a completely different vibe. Just listen to this ambiance. It lends a hand to what I mentioned earlier. A perfectly quiet, empty space with liminal effects to enhance the experience perfectly. The wind and sound of you walking is all the game really needs. I'm not saying no other Fallout did this, but there's something so unsettling about 3's environmental audio that makes you feel small. If you aren't sure what that's called, it's called artificial loneliness, and they do it so well. It's a loneliness that's carefully constructed, not because the world is empty of content, but because it's empty of comfort. And that's what makes it linger. Every time I got a new settlement with people, I was so stoked to speak to a person. Someone. Anyone. All of the wonderful things combine into one hell of an environment. The weather, buildings, skeletons, holotapes, sound, and radio all added up to make a near-perfect atmosphere. But that isn't the only thing that makes Fallout 3 a great game. We gotta talk about the exploration. When you finally exit Vault 101 and get your bearings and sight back, off in the distance you can see different structures, which, unlike other games I'd played, you can actually go explore. There aren't many things on the horizon you can't explore. It was pretty mind-blowing when I first looked at the map, even though technically Fallout 3 actually has the smallest overworld of the modern Fallout games. But due to how the map is broken up and how quiet it is and separated all the POIs are, it doesn't feel that small. When I first headed towards the main quest objective, I found myself getting sidetracked almost instantly. Everything, no matter how empty it may have looked, grabbed my attention. I wanted to stop at every red rocket, every crumbling two-story house, every ghost town I walked past, just to see what it was hiding. Fallout 3 does a great job at gently leading you towards the main objective, but lets go of your hand whenever you feel like wandering off the path. While traveling from point A to B, there's a lot of empty space, but it never feels useless. Going from one point of interest to another, I'd somehow ending up stopping 3 or 4 times before realizing how far away I'd actually gotten. It was fun to get lost in the sauce. The first time I played Fallout 3, I decided I wasn't going to fast travel until I'd seen every inch and corner of the capital Wasteland, and I can tell you it was absolutely worth it. Getting lost in Fallout 3 doesn't feel like a failure, it feels like participation. The map isn't designed to funnel you cleanly from one important place to the next. It's designed to let you wander into spaces that were never meant to be important to anyone, except for the people who used to live there. You're not just moving between objectives, you're moving through the remains of a world that doesn't care whether you find it interesting or not. And that indifference is what makes it real to me. One thing I will say about discovery and exploration, though, is that a lot of the locations require prior knowledge. Talking to an NPC, following environmental storytelling, finding notes. My first time around, I found things like Galaxy News Radio and the metro tunnels incredibly confusing before I got the hang of it. But in hindsight, that confusion was part of what made the world feel real. You weren't being guided, you were being dropped into it. There's also a rhythm to moving through the capital wasteland that I've never really felt in other open world games. Long stretches of quiet, then sudden tension, then silence again. You spend minutes just walking with the wind and distant ambience, or the radio if you have it on, and then out of nowhere, you're in a firefight. Or cornered in a subway tunnel, or being ran up on by a deathclaw. And when it's over, the world goes quiet again. like nothing happened. The emotional whiplash makes the Wasteland feel indifferent to your survival, which weirdly makes every small victory feel earned. What I love about exploration in Fallout 3 is that the world doesn't beg you to explore it. There aren't constant markers pulling your eyes in a dozen directions. Sometimes you see a building in the distance and there's no promise of a reward waiting for you there. No quest, no loot, no chest, no NPC waving you down. You go there because you're curious. And sometimes all you find is silence. A skeleton in a bathtub or a room that looks like it was abandoned mid-sentence. The game is comfortable letting your curiosity go unanswered, and somehow that makes the moments where you find something more meaningful. Some of my favorite discoveries in Fallout 3 weren't tied to quests at all. They were moments the game never called attention to. A collapsed highway with a makeshift camp underneath it. A house with children's toys still scattered on the floor. A terminal entry that ends mid-sentence. No XP pop-up, no journal update, just a small human story sitting there, waiting to be noticed. Fallout doesn't force you to care about these things. It just gives you a chance to. Fallout doesn't just let go of your hand on explorations or emotions, it also takes a hands-off approach when it comes to choices. Moral ambiguity has always existed in Fallout, but the way the series asks you to think about right, wrong, and consequence changes from game to game. Sometimes morality is tracked as a number, sometimes it's shaped by who holds power, and sometimes it's defined by the faction that benefits from your choices. Across the series, Fallout experiments with two overlapping systems: karma, how the game judges your actions, and faction weight, how the world responds to them. Those two things are not always aligned. The series wants you to make a choice, but which one is up to you. In the early Fallout games, there is a karma system, but the world itself is pretty cold about it. You can do something that feels morally right and still make things worse for somebody else down the line. It's less about being a hero and more about realizing that in the Wasteland, every solution kind of breaks something else. Towns and groups remember what you did, but the game doesn't really pretend that good intentions fix broken systems. I mean, in Fallout 1 and 2, if you kill a child NPC, you permanently get the Child Killer title. Specific factions or groups will refuse to speak to you, and anyone that does speaks with fear or disgust. The label follows you everywhere. No undoing it, no narrative softening. That is just the effect of your choice. Some actions aren't just bad karma, they fundamentally redefine who you are in the world. That specific situation was removed after Fallout 2 due to ethical, legal, and game mechanic concerns, but those who played them know what it was like. Fallout 3 is way more upfront about morality. You've got a visible karma system, and the game is pretty comfortable telling you, yeah, that was a good thing, or nope, that was messed up. Factions exist, sure, but they don't really define your identity the way your karma does. The world mostly reacts to you as a good person or bad person. It's a simpler moral framework, not worse, just more traditional. It feels more like the game asking, what kind of person are you, and not so much who are you empowering by doing this. Personally, I always felt pretty shitty playing an evil playthrough. Running around the Wasteland with the Scourge of Humanity title, turning on the radio, hearing Three Dog absolutely dragging me from GNR saying,
"That merciless fucking defiler is still out there, alright? That piece of shit from Vault 101 can't even be considered human.
or,
The devil walks among us children. Oh, she may look like us, but she calls hell home. Nice going, scumbag."
Three Dog doesn't moralize in a preachy way. He reports you like a radio host warning the public about a roaming disaster. You become part of the background radiation of the Capital Wasteland, a name people hear on the radio and hope they never meet. New Vegas still tracks karma in the background. If you steal from civilians or kill raiders, the game is quietly keeping tabs on that. But what actually shapes your experience is faction reputation. You're not remembered as the good courier or the evil courier. You're remembered as the person the NCR trusts, or the person the Legion wants dead, or the problem house needs handled. You can do something that feels morally right and completely destabilize a region. Or you can do something morally questionable and create a kind of order. New Vegas doesn't really care about your moral identity. It cares about what kind of future you're helping to build and who gets to define that future. When I was finishing Hard Luck Blues, standing at that reactor terminal, I was a bit crushed. My two options were save the Vault Dwellers from their horrible fate by rerouting the power, or save the NCR's crops by containing the radiation inside the vault. It feels like a no-win situation, but you have to make a choice, no matter who it leaves in the dust. That's when I started to rationalize, well, it's only 4 people, and the NCR's crops probably feed 10, 20 times more. It's uncomfortable, but in the end, it's what you have to do. And New Vegas makes you sit with your choices. Fallout 4 drops the karma meter, but it doesn't stop judging your choices. It shifts that judgment onto companions and factions. So instead of the game telling you this was good or this was bad, you've got people around you reacting to what you do and speaking their minds about your actions. One companion thinks you're doing the right thing, another thinks you've crossed the line. And the factions you align with interpret your actions in totally different ways. It feels less like a moral scoreboard and more like navigating a group of people who all have their own lines in the sand, which at times is completely irritating. Some companions will get upset if you steal, or take a chem, or shoot an innocent Wastelander in the face. But if you had McCready as a companion like I did, it was totally a vibe. In Fallout 4, there are plenty of big choices the player can make. Side with the Institute or Railroad, the Brotherhood or Minutemen. And after an ungodly amount of hours, I hit that very specific Fallout 4 phase where you're just...
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I'll let you know if I hear of any settlements that need our help.
Hey there.
I've heard of another settlement that's in trouble. I'll mark it on your map.
Super done with Preston and the Minutemen. If you know, you know. So instead of diving into a specific faction ending, I want to talk about a choice from a DLC. When you're in the thick of it in Nuka World and you realize in order to complete it, you need to expand your reach into the Commonwealth. Nuka World does something Fallout almost never does. It turns your own progress against you. After hours spent building the Commonwealth into something safer, it asks you to tear it down piece by piece, one settlement at a time. There's no moral speech attached to it. Just a map, a list of targets, and the uncomfortable realization that the people you're being told to exploit are the same people you once protected. The game doesn't tell you who you are in that moment. It asks, are you a Wasteland warlord? Or its protector? And yeah, I'm skipping Fallout 76 here. Not because it's bad, but because as an online game, it can't really let the world change around you in the same way. It's in a pretty constant state. So Fallout never really stops talking about morality, it just changes where that morality lives. Sometimes it lives in a number on a screen, sometimes it lives in the faction that survive your choices. And sometimes it lives in the consequences you don't see coming until much later. I don't love Fallout because it's perfect or because it makes me feel like a hero. I love it because it gives me somewhere to disappear when I need to breathe, and somewhere to come back from feeling a little different than when I left. The Wasteland has always been there for me when I needed quiet, when I needed distance, and when I needed stories that didn't wrap themselves up neatly. It gives me humor when I need to laugh and an outlet when I have some feelings to work through. It never tells me who I'm supposed to be. It lets me decide where I want to go and who I want to save. Fallout doesn't just give you a world to explore, it gives you ruins to sit with. Empty rooms, unfinished stories, choices that don't come with clean endings. That's what I keep coming back for. Not the power fantasy, but the quiet spaces in between. So, survivors and dwellers, take your time out there. Wander off the path, listen to the radio a little too long. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my story and my connection with what I think is one of the coolest series in the world. Take one last look at the ruins before you move on. Until next time, I'm the Wasteland Historian, and I'll be here, waiting for you out in the wastes.
Vault Tech have prepared these